Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Games Up podcast. My name is Cameron McCulloch-Keeble, and I am joined for the big one by Lewis Crawford.
Hello there.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Good.
Good. You have a slight echo on you this evening. It's like you're in a cave. It's fine. It sounds fine.
Okay.
I just like the idea that you've gone into a reclusive mode, and this is all you come out for.
Yeah.
Congratulations on your big day last week.
Yes, thank you. I heard you talking about me.
Good, I'm glad. It's nice to know that somebody listens. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about it for a couple of weeks. We're going to get down to it. This is our Game of the Year episode, one that we look forward to every fucking year. There's no news this week for that reason. There's no point putting news at the front of a Game of the Year podcast because this is probably going to go a bit long, but there is an indie game of the year. Lewis, what is your indie game of 2017?
So my indie game of 2017 is Hollow Knight by Team Cherry. A wonderful side-scrolling action-adventure with a grim atmosphere, kind of reminiscent of, Dark Souls and all those kind of style games. A deep, dark world that kind of keeps you along and makes you want to explore more and more. It's a classic Metroidvania, so you pick up things that let you go further. Really fun combat, really fluid. And I think one of the things that really stands out about Hollow Knight is that it's one of those things you can only really get with indie games where the audio and the art and everything kind of works so well together because it has that close vision that you sometimes lose when you have big AAA teams. Yeah, Hollow Knight.
Hollow Knight, absolutely well deserved. The game was praised at so many industry awards. It's unbelievable. I think it's been put up for the BAFTAs. I know it was put up for Game Awards things. So yeah, absolutely in keeping with the mainstream. Well done. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, this is how we do Game of the Year every year. What we're first going to do is say in order our nominations that didn't quite make it, our runners-up, and then we will explain what our Game of the Year is. We'll give a sort of debate structure to it, so we start with each person saying why it's their Game of the Year, and then slowly we'll work through themed rebuttals. So, we'll talk about graphics, but it'll be a rebuttal of, well, this is better than the other, that one's better than the last. It's kind of like a debate structure. We'll make more sense of it as we go. Let's dive straight in. Do you want to go with your first runner-up, or shall I? Or
okay, I'll start.
Okay.
So my first runner-up is a game that there's very little chance that Cameron will ever play. Which is... If
you say Crash Bandicoot, I'm closing the Skype call.
Oh, that would be really even better. Now I'm really tempted to change it, but no. It's Resident Evil 7.
Okay.
Yeah. Something that actually I'm not very into. I'm not great with jumpy horrors. But I really enjoyed Resident Evil 7. It's kind of revitalized horror for me a little bit. Because it changed Resident Evil, made it a first-person horror-based game. And I think it's really beautiful, really kind of well-designed. They really worked to make this. One of the things that I think was actually weird is that when they first presented it, it looked a bit like it was streamer bait, if you know what I mean by that. Mm-hmm. But actually, it does really feed into kind of the original Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2. It's just great. And it's good to see Resident Evil actually do well because the last few games have been awful, terrible. If you talk to any Resident Evil fan about Resident Evil 6, they'll all say the same thing. That's all I'm saying. And it's
and you're right. It's a truly deserving game. Resident Evil is Resi 7 revitalized the franchise in no uncertain terms. Everyone thought Resi was dead before that game came out, and I think I'm really excited to see what Resident Evil 8 is because we needed somebody to take on the mantle of PT, and Capcom kind of did, and they've got a lot of promise going into their future, so good on them. In a similar vein, my third place for the year is Assassin's Creed Origins. It's a good game. It's a really good game. I had a lot of fun with it. I've put about 60 hours in at this point. I've played a lot of the game. I've gone through a lot of the content that it has, and it's the best Assassin's Creed there's been in years. There's no doubt about that. It's so beautifully designed and imaginatively put together. It's incredibly well crafted, and Ubisoft have gone out of their way to give a franchise that frankly deserves it a really good innings. As a long-term fan of the franchise, it left me concerned for the future direction, but I can't disagree that the game itself was stunningly well made, and so it deserves a third place on this list, absolutely.
Nice, and a good choice. And I agree
Thank you.
with it. So mine is a wonderful PS4 exclusive. If I did a top 10, I think most of them would be. But made by Guerrilla Games, Horizon Zero Dawn. One of the things I think that really stands out about this game, and it's something that it bears saying, is that sometimes you get exclusive games that are so well tooled to the actual hardware that they seem to kind of way outperform everything else. And Horizon Zero Dawn is one of those games where, like, in some ways, it's the best graphics you'll ever get at the moment. At the moment, it's the best graphics you'll see, even though it's on like a console that's not as powerful as, say, my PC, or even the PS4 Pro is not as powerful as my PC. But there isn't games that look quite as good on my PC, and I think it's wonderfully detailed. And the audio score is amazing. You play as Aloy fighting dinosaurs with your bow, which is a crazy idea. There we go. And it's got like this really deep story. I think people are a little bit iffy on the story a little bit. I think that's kind of its only kind of sour points to me. And it's got a bit of a high difficulty curve. I think those are like my two kind of things that stop it from maybe pushing it a little bit further. But it's a very enjoyable game.
Fair enough. I was wondering where it would come on the list. I knew it would be in there somewhere. I was just wondering whether it would be third, second, or third. Third, second, or first, even. My second place goes to another Ubisoft game. I kind of feel like they had a really strong year this year. And it's something that surprised me. My second runner-up is, in second place, South Park, The Fractured But Whole. I probably put the same amount, if a little less, into Fractured that I did into Assassins. And I've been really struggling to come up with a game of the year this year, or I was really struggling to until last week. And and I was like thinking, if I had to go for one of these, which one would I put above the other? And South Park eventually beat out Assassins, because I remember stepping away from Assassins and having lots of conversations with you about, is this good? Is this bad? Do I like it? Do I not? And it was undeniably fun and a great thing to put my time into. But South Park, I remember stepping away from just much more overall satisfied.
Okay.
It had me laughing the whole time, and I've never watched an episode of the show. I've never seen an episode through the full way. So I was on my ass half the time. It was hilarious. But I also think it's like got a surprisingly deep video game in there. And it doesn't really need to. It could be a gimmicky comedy game for 20 hours that you finish and you're done with, but it's not. It's actually a really cleverly made, well put together deep RPG. It's not like Divinity levels of deep, but it's a pretty good game for what it is. And it certainly does more than it says on the tin. So I think that deserves a lot of respect.
Yeah, a good choice. I really enjoyed that as well, actually.
So, Mr. Crawford, what are you putting forward to be debated?
Nier Automata, or is Nier a tomato, as we said before?
It's going to be so hard to do the discussion without going near a tomato.
Yeah.
I will let you have your 5 minutes of opening remarks in just a second. My game of the year this year is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. And I think this is going to make for a really fucking interesting discussion. But I've been playing it quite a lot, and I'll get into why in a second. So here's your 5 minutes. Here's your opening remarks. Why is Nier Automata the winner of the year?
All right. Nier Automata by Platinum Games and Yoko Taro It's a very unique experience. Something that I've never kind of seen replicated in any other game. Just like the story itself goes so much further than everything I've ever played. And like, it's the kind of thing where you're up at 4 a.m. going, oh, I'm still playing this because the story drags you along so much. And like trying to find deeper elements to it and kind of it's wonderfully crafted in a way that just brings you closer all the time. And I remember getting to the end and putting it down and going just like, wow, I've never played something so deep. And it's rare, really. It's rare to see something that's that beautiful. So Nier Automata, you are 2B, the character, who's wonderfully designed, as they say.
And most of the Reddit porn forums would agree with you.
All two of them, yeah. But yeah, so wonderfully well-designed game. You kind of just, it's androids versus robots, but there's so much more going on. And there's like huge elements to it that kind of, that's the kind of pit that drags you along, is how it's really like a coming to age story as much as it is a war between androids and robots. And it's a beautiful looking game. And I think I've been talking about the story, but gameplay wise, the combat is beautiful. Like it's, Platinum Games are known for making really good combat games. Obviously they made Bayonetta 2, which was everyone's favorite if they had a Wii. But yeah, they're known for making beautiful combat games, and they do the action so well in this. It's really kind of a joy to play. Gets tough, but it's a joy to play. Yeah, I'll start there for my start.
Okay. My opening remarks are going to be very different for obvious reasons.
Fun. There's people you can shoot.
In the week that we're recording this, Yahtzee Croshaw put out his review of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and firstly, that's hilarious. Go and watch that if you haven't already. But he made a comment that I think is very fair, and his comment is that PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds was inevitable. What it is somebody took the deathmatch concept from any multiplayer you've ever played, and they said, what if we could make it with the biggest amount of people and the biggest amount of space available? And that's absolutely true. That's what the game is. It is a large game where you have to be the last person alive. But I don't think the fact that it's inevitable takes away from the achievements of the people who made it. Now, I will start this debate right off by saying, yeah, the game's ugly. It's incredibly ugly. Yeah, the game has absolutely piss all minus a tiny little bit of lore building story. But I won for the first time last week, and I have never had an experience in video games like winning a round of that game. I shook for 45 minutes after winning that game. And that sounds pathetic, right? If you haven't played it or if you haven't got into it that much, it sounds like, really, it's just a multiplayer game. But the level of tension and the way the mechanics interact with each other to make that tension is, yes, inevitable, but it's so much fucking fun. I have not felt a sense of achievement and a sense of, wow, I managed to do that in a game as much as I have with PlayerUnknown's recently. We're seeing a real renaissance of multiplayer in recent years, whether it's couch co-op with stuff like Overcooked or Rocket League, or online stuff where it's like Overwatch, which is like they finally managed to get the format of esports mobile working on console, or PlayerUnknown's, which is kind of an evolution of the deathmatch. And it's a shame because single player is struggling undeniably as a result of it. But I don't think that takes away in any way from how impressive a game like this is, considering the bare bones it's built of. So my argument putting forward is that PlayerUnknown's is such a fresh, different experience to what we've had from years of single player that there's nothing quite like it that came out last year.
Fair.
Thank
Fair.
you.
Okay. I wonder with PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, whether my issue with it generally is that I think there'll be a follow-up by somebody else like Fortnite or some other game that will kind of do everything much better. and that's probably like my main
I, f-
issue with it, I guess.
I feel like I'm really pulling the wind out of my own sails here by arguing this point, but I think the way I can kind of assure you that won't happen is that there's very little to do in the game. I mean, like, there aren't, like, you might be able to perfect on systems, but there aren't really many systems. Like, the main systems are RNG loot, a large map, and a closing space. You might be able to. I mean, there's definitely like technical improvements you can make.
Yeah, and stop people from crashing and cheating.
Well, yeah. But, yeah, but you could say the same of Overwatch the year it came out. You could say the same of Pokemon Go the year it came out.
Yeah, true.
Multiplayer, you're never going to come out the other side and be like, wow, everybody in that lobby was really nice and we had a lovely discussion about politics.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
So I feel like for the most part, this debate is me going to be defending the stance because
well, it's an interesting one because I mean I guess like the way that I perceive this so far is I'm kind of going like Nier's like this beautiful game with audio and visuals and everything, gameplay's great, and you're kind of going, the game's awful but it's fun.
I was hoping to use the word simplistic, but yeah, I suppose that works too. I kind of feel like for the most part this is going to be me defending a choice in the hopes of convincing you that something this simplistic can be a game this year. But so I'm going to start aggressive and we'll work from there.
Okay.
What does Nier do this year that is new?
Oh, okay. Right. Let's see from there. What am I allowed to say?
Got it!
I think... I don't want to bang on about the story too much. But I do think like the story is what it brings and that's its unique thing. And it's something, I say myself, like, I play all the games pretty much. I play everything. And I haven't, and my love is single player story games. So this is kind of my field, and I haven't played something like Nier. And there's lots of different elements to that, none of which I can really explain. That's one of the problems, actually. Is it's a game that's also got that trouble that it's like can't really explain why I love it, but it's amazing. It's got all that going for it. Its story is just very unique and very touching, I guess. Like it's a game that I don't know whether you would cry, but there's moments in it where you're there. And there isn't, for me, I'm quiet and, I don't really emote too much. So when a game kind of brings me that far, it kind of just, it's, where we talked, I was listening to our E3 thing from 2015 the other day. And you were like, you're not very animated. I don't know, I was just reminding myself of my opinions from back then. How excited I was. That was 4 a.m. But yeah, I don't emote very much. I'm quite subdued, and this kind of got me more than I kind of thought it would. And not much does, You got the beginning of Last of Us, first 5 minutes of Up, and this.
Okay. So I think that leads fairly nicely onto story. Do you want to summarize the plot of Nier and maybe why, if it connected with you that much, like what it was specifically that got you?
Okay. I mean, that's a very big ask. You're kind of going like, summarize Star Wars. Actually, Star Wars isn't that bad. Let me think of a better example. That has to be you, doesn't it? Can have another person who knows what Final Fantasy VII is and Metal Gear Solid and all that. Okay.
Sorry, summarize something that's not Japanese.
It's just, yeah, I mean, it's got, a very convoluted plot that's kind of hard to go through easily. Yeah. 2B is a character who is finding out that, like, her reason for existing doesn't really matter. I'm going to try and do this least spoilery as possible.
No. This is, hold on. Apologies, this is Game of the Year. If you didn't think there were going to be spoilers, that's kind of your own fault. We, like, I'm kind of lucky because I've got very little that I can spoil. If you were thinking about playing near, skip to the end of the show. Yeah, there's a guy, he might shoot you. Skip to the end of the show where we'll make a decision, or like skip 20 minutes or whatever, where we'll be talking about like graphics and stuff. But yeah, for any time we discuss spoilers, anytime we discuss story, that's a definite risk.
Okay, all right.
Now you're safe.
So 2B and her companion 9S are given like a mission to kind of go defend and save Earth essentially from robots. Why'd you give me difficult tasks? And then, but they find a group of friendly robots, and that's not meant to be the case. And they're told to like take them out by command, but they don't do it. And they kind of they go through and work out why these robots are kind of like emoting, even though like they're meant to just be robots and nothing. And they kind of go on more adventures with the friendly robots who who are completely opposite of what they've been told they should be like. And ultimately, like 9S essentially finds out that the humans that they're trying to protect Earth for don't exist, and they never existed. And they're in this like, or not that they never existed, but essentially they existed a long time ago, and they're in this pointless battle that's kind of continuing, even though they're not like defending anything. It's just a lie, and the people in command know it's a lie. Like the android commanders know that there are no humans anymore. And that's kind of like a deep secret that kind of plays out through the whole thing. Yeah. And and 2B, we find out it's specifically designed to kill 9S. Because that's like her role in life is to basically kill 9S, because 9S would always find out about the secret, about the fact that humans don't exist. It's worth mentioning, obviously, these are androids, so like they're rangers as opposed to like specific people, if that makes sense. You know, it's like they're the 2B
Right,
range.
Okay.
I guess that's the main plot points. Yeah. And then there's a few more stuff that happens after that, but that's kind of like the main things that run through the story.
So it sounds to me very
Very personal, I guess is what I would say.
Very shades of grey, us versus them kind of story.
Yeah.
Okay,
And like the whole point of the robots being this evil entity, and then you kind of find out that actually they're just kind of defending themselves. And like they're not really different from the androids. Yeah.
So, in comparison, there basically isn't a story for Player Unknowns. It's very much a multiplayer match. There's a tiny little amount of like unwritten lore behind it, in that you are parachuting onto an island that is designed specifically for this war game. There is a totalitarian government. It's set off the coast of Russia. This is a thing that they do for the fun of it. It's kind of Hunger Games-y in that sense. And you can see that by the certain like tags you get on walls and sprays, and there are images of the government in places. But I'm not going to pretend that there's like a deep-seated story with a secret you reveal at the end. That's the framing for the one map that currently exists in the game on the live version. There's absolutely no story, but there are the stories you get of you playing the game with people. There are certainly the little emergent bits of story that come out from the way you interact with the world and the people around it. Some of those will obviously be nasty, and some of those will obviously be I can't believe I lost that, or I can't believe they said that or acted that way. But I think when you get a good team of people, especially friends or people you know, the kind of emergent stories you can have from those experiences are pretty magical.
Okay. What's our next? What should we talk about next?
That's a good question. You've kind of got me pipped on graphics, so let's go with that.
Oh no. It's a fun day for you. We've got
So
audio
I'm
next.
gonna
We're gonna have fun with that as
I
well.
am gonna I am gonna defend graphics in PUBG right now. So we're moving on to graphics, and I think now PUBG is absolutely built of, for the most part, stock assets. It is absolutely built of, for the most part, nothing impressive. What it is doing though is rendering a giant map, all live, that you can interact with in many ways. If you drop into a hot zone and you get a long scope, you can shoot across the map. There is a reason it looks crap, because that's a lot to ask of any piece of tech. It does not run amazingly on lots of pieces of tech. And you're shaking your head at me.
Well, it's not too true. I mean, it's
Yeah?
kind of true and kind of isn't true. I mean,
So what about it isn't true?
like it's not that far away from what we can do these days. I guess, like with while still having good graphics.
But but the problem is that, like, what you define as good graphics is what's good graphics in front of you. But
Yeah.
to do that, game worlds don't load the other 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 miles of the game, because that doesn't make any sense. GTA 5 is not
Yeah, of
1080p the whole map over. It's 1080p in the
But there are
two.
games that do manage to have both good graphics and large worlds, and loads of people.
But what I'm saying is not loaded all at that one time. Like, okay, the game doesn't load every bit of the map all at the one time. It doesn't draw grass past a certain point, so on and so
Yeah.
forth. But the world is there, and the world is physical. And if somebody enters a building or a door, they go out of your sight. They interact with that world. It is loading the whole thing at once with those 100 people and all of the actions they're doing. I think it's a little more impressive than it gets a knock for.
Yeah, yeah, okay. My only problem with PUBG, I guess, is that ultimately it lies in what you say about it being, um, stock assets and basically made of string, bits of stuff sellotaped together, with a bit of like the right rule set so that it works as a game. Um, and like in many ways, it's kind of the opposite of what I feel a game of the year should be. Just because it's not kind of like really focused on like the story and it doesn't need to have a story, but the action and the graphics and the gameplay and the audio, and it has obviously those things, but they're not kind of made by the game. Like it's what's that word saying? Like most of that isn't made by the people who actually put the game together, and that
I
troubles me.
I get what you mean. I feel like if you had to, like, write an allegory for the two games, Nier is this artisanal, handcrafted. It's like the exposed brickwork hipster coffee shop of a video game. Everything is built from scratch for it, and having not played it and not touched it in any way, I'm sure it reflects that quality. Whereas Pubbage is like a really good McDonald's meal.
Yeah. Okay.
There's
Yeah.
no real meat in it, right? Like, the
Chips all hollow.
milkshakes are almost certainly plastic, and the guy who served it to you just wants to fucking die. But at 1:30 in the morning, when you finish that cheeseburger, by Christ, there is nothing like it.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like this is an interesting discussion for that reason. In that there's something to be said about the games industry has gone into very different ways. The middle has dropped out undeniably, and what you have is the indies who are making, for the most part, 8-bit side scrollers, basically, or puzzle games of a form, or this kind of thing. And it's simplistic, but when they hit the nail on the head, there is no other nail like it. And then you have the AAA who are making either games as live services or these super small but intensely well-made stories. So the question just lies in who can convince the other that is better or what we needed that year.
Yeah.
and I'm in for a Big Mac right now.
Okay. How many games did you say
So,
you played on PUBG?
um,
I have interest.
God, I don't know, but I'm gonna look it up.
We'll work out if you're better than
Was
random chance.
Oh God, no, absolutely not. I won that one game because the other guy was in a Jeep and I managed to get to a tree. It was pure luck, but it was fucking exciting luck.
Yeah, I can bet.
So look, so what I want to ask you is, PUBG looks horrible. I will give you. What does Nier look like?
Okay. So Nier has beautiful graphics. It's one of those ones where it also has quite simplistic graphics, I guess.
Hmm.
It's not, say, everything in the entire game is well tooled. It's kind of this area you're in is well tooled, but the background is eh. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that's kind of always going to be the case in something like Nier, which kind of alternates between 3D and kind of 2.5D at times. So, like graphically, it's not. It's tough to say because graphically, in some places, it's amazing, as I say. In some places, it's beautiful. You're like, oh, this is one of the best like scenes I've seen. Other times, you're like, it's not graphics that push it, but it
Okay.
does have it has wonderful character models that are really well designed. Yeah, well designed.
So- So neither of them are taking home the trophy for graphics. Is that fair to say?
yeah.
Nier scores points over PlayerUnknown's undeniably, but neither of them are winning on that front.
No, I mean it's not. It's definitely not like the most graphically challenging game in the list that we just said so far. Anyway, in our runners up.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's put straight out on the table if we had to pick a winner based entirely on graphics, Assassins.
For you, I'd still say Horizon, but
Really?
yeah, Horizon's really beautiful. But that's only because, as I say, it's one of those games that's so well tooled to its.
Now I will give you. Now that's undeniable. Horizon is absolutely tooled to the PS4. I would argue it does not have the art direction that Assassins has. Some of those buildings and those
Yeah.
structures are like that. The final temple at the bottom of the map for Assassins. As somebody who like,
But that's what Ubisoft does really well, or at least the Assassin's Creed do so well. Is buildings.
yeah, absolutely. They really do have a very unique style of architecture.
Get off topic.
Are
But
we
it's fine.
kind of making a case for Assassins here?
See, this is what I thought you were going to come with, but
I just like, if you'd put it forward, I would have like said maybe we should put it on the table, but it I got out of it something very different that I went in for, and that's not a bad thing, but it's not the game I'm going to be looking forward to playing when we
Yeah.
finish this.
understandable.
You know? Okay, so neither of them winning on graphics. Are either of them winning on audio?
Yes, mine.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to say this to you now. You're not winning this one.
Disagree, but kick my ass.
So we'll start with soundtrack. Nier Automata has a beautiful soundtrack with so many songs that I could just sing to you now, which would be awful, but my point is that like it has songs that kind of stick with you, and I think like not many games are good at doing that. There's a few examples that you can imagine, like Halo or something. You can kind of, if you play through Halo, you'll probably finish it and go, and like Nier does that to you. You'll find yourself walking along and just going like, that wasn't a song, by the way. That was just me. And
Thank you for clarifying
Yeah.
that, Mr. Elfman. I appreciate it.
the best song. Yeah, and it's beautiful. I think it actually won soundtrack of the year. I'm pretty sure it did in terms of on the Game Awards.
Okay.
It's well deserved. It's very well deserved. Yeah, and in terms of like kind of just general sounds when you're going around, all the robots are beautifully well voiced. All the characters are really well voiced. at times. Sometimes it goes
Okay.
into text to speak, but yeah, in terms of audio, like it's probably quite high up there in terms of just audio design and audio soundtrack in general.
So, in the same theme, I think audio is one of the strongest points for Pubbage. But I think it's the way it uses audio and the things you have to listen for that are important. Audio is a really important part of the game because it's very tense, especially in the later stages as the zone pushes everybody together. You can't step into buildings, you can't look through certain windows without having to listen out for audio cues of whether you're in danger or not. And it's the second a door that you've closed is opened by somebody else, there's a very sudden shift in what that game becomes. It goes from, looking around, it goes from being tactical to a very sudden fight or flight situation. And it really is signaled by the audio because you'll have heard nothing for 20 minutes and then a Jeep will drive by. And I know that might sound like, hey, you're arguing audio and you've heard nothing. But the effect that hearing a person has on you is very instant and it's very important. And if you're playing it really well, you're not just listening out for the audio of what's around you, but what direction it came from, whether you're safe, where you can hide. Did the Jeep drive from behind you or in front? Did the shot come from the left or to the right? And that is what makes somebody who plays it well at that level. That's what makes the higher level or pro level players. If you watch the people who play it on Twitch, for example, or play it professionally, they're able to mark out exactly where a thing came from and save themselves as a result. And I think that's a really impressive thing. It's there's only soundtrack in the menus and it's unremarkable, but I think the way that audio can be a make or break thing within the game is super interesting. Certainly more interesting than the graphics.
Okay. I can see where you're
So
coming
you
from there,
hadn't
but like,
you hadn't thought about this, had you?
well, I'll be honest, I didn't think that's something you'd bring up. Games have had like directional audio for a long time now. Not to just like, nah.
No. But it's a fair.
But I
It's a
understand.
fair
The point is that like the
criticism.
audio here is so, but in many ways I feel like I could say the same thing for something like Resident Evil and say that like it does the same thing that you described with like the fear that instantly comes into you if you hear like something and the pace changes and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's worthy of note, I guess. Yeah.
I think the thing that makes it different in this sense is the unscriptedness of it.
Yeah.
In Resident Evil, when a noise is made, there's a scripted reason that noise is made. And having not played Resident Evil, I will hold my hands up. But I've always personally had those problems with games like Tomb Raider, for example, where a scripted moment happens, but if you don't move, nothing changes. The game waits for you. Whereas in Pubbage, or as I'd like to make a campaign that we start calling it Pubbage. In Pubbage, you have to react and you have to respond, and sometimes responding is doing nothing, or sometimes it's running out. But it's very much. I think it's kind of one of the core things that makes a good video game is you can't let it pass you by. I love games because you're not passive. You have to be active and you have to be engaged in that world. And for me, and that's not to shit down on Resident Evil, I don't know what it was like, but for me, you have to be active in Pubbage because if you're not, you might as well not be playing it.
Yeah. Okay. I've heard like many people say that the best tactic is to be really quiet though. In that sense.
Yeah. Oh god, yeah, absolutely. The best tactic is to be quiet. But so okay, and you're right. The best tactic is to be quiet. Imagine
That'd probably
if
be awful, wouldn't it?
all nine. I don't think you would. I think you'd be good. Imagine, but so the best tactic is to be quiet, but all the other 99 people are thinking the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
So, like, people aren't trying to open doors. You have to catch them out. If somebody drives a Jeep up, you have to know where it came from because they're either in your house or you're getting to them. When bombs are dropping because they do little bomb raids, you have to listen twice as hard because that's the time that people will use it to not be quiet. And that's what I think it is every suggestion you could bring up of, okay, but it's not doing this, but it is doing that. The game itself is not incredibly detailed, is not incredibly highly made, but it's made well enough to facilitate behavior in players that makes an incredibly unique experience.
Yeah. Okay. I can see
So, we have 2 more segments left
Ooh.
on this thing. The first is, because I want to try and structure it a little more than we've done before.
Yeah.
I think last time we went for an hour and a half and cut it down. The first segment is mechanics. I think a Platinum game, you always need to talk about the mechanics and the gameplay of it because gameplay is king. And we'll get to the final in a second. So, mechanically, tell me about Nier.
Oh, okay. So as you say, Platinum Games are known for making the really good action hack and slashy style games, and they do not disappoint in Nier at all. Like the whole thing there's different sections. You start off a section in like I think what do you call it? You're in like a ship and you kind of shoot things around you. I forget what the style is called. Okay, but anyway, that's kind of like how you start off the game, and then you kind of go into being like Nier 2B as a character, fighting robots with your swords, and the mechanics here are beautiful. Like it's one of those, a lot like Bayonetta, where you've got many different combos, many different actions, many different ways that these weapons can be used to make things exciting and interesting. It's very smooth and fluid, and you go around destroying things. One of the best things about it, actually, and it's something I should have probably mentioned in audio, is that when you play your second playthrough, which to get the proper story of Nier, you have to play it through 5 times, but it's not the same game. It's not the same game. It's for some reason they call it playthrough, but you can think of it more as like chapters of the game.
So hold on. Explain that then, because that's.
It's just for some reason it's called like ending 1, ending 2, ending 3, but in actuality it's like you play the game the first time and you play like 1/3 of the game, and that's chapter 1. Then you play through like that chapter again, but as a different character, and that kind of changes things. And that's ending 2, and then ending 3 and 4 are like just like after that, like chapter 3 and chapter 4.
Oh,
it is confusing. It's a little bit confusing the way it's structured, but it's kind of it makes sense why it's like that when you play it.
Okay.
But the point is, when you play through the second time, you get to play as a character called the character 9S, and he has like a hacking ability that is just really enjoyable to play with, where it takes you into like a top-down, cutesy little retro 2D, like very like reminiscent of old arcade games like Asteroids or something style combat, where you kind of shoot little things and shoot little rocks and stuff like that. And the cool thing about that ability is that the reason I should have mentioned it in audio is that it takes whatever audio track is playing and plays it like an 8-bit version when you do that. So whenever you like hack someone, it changes the audio to an 8-bit version of that audio while you're doing that mini game. And it's beautifully done, because I don't really know how they do it technologically must be quite clever, because of the fact that obviously you have to like make sure these are perfectly in sync and switch to them instantly.
I was going to ask, is that scripted or like
that happens whenever you do
fairly dynamic?
Yeah, it's dynamic.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, it's quite clever. But it is beautifully done. I should have mentioned it in audio. But in terms of mechanics, it's really enjoyable, and it kind of keeps it fresh, because when you're playing through the second time, you kind of do have many of the same bits happening. I mentioned like the second playthrough, you play through the same story but as a different character, and that bit keeps it really fresh and keeps it really interesting, keeps the combat interesting because you kind of change the way battles work. There's another character later on who has a similar deal going on. So it's convoluted, but they keep things really fresh with the combat, and they keep the combat interesting throughout the entire game. And it's like a 40-hour game or something, so keeping it interesting is pretty tough, I guess. And it's no like easy feat, and they do it really well.
So I'm getting it that each one of the characters is a different way to experience the same thing, but with additional.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the big focus of the story. But in terms of like the gameplay, that does keep it really fresh, and it's good that it can keep it fresh for that long.
Mechanically, I think the most important part is how the game, on my side, Puppet ramps up tension. I think that if you want to drop in and play it play it quickly, win or don't, get it over and done with, you can. But I think you're kind of missing the experience if you do that a little bit. I think the real magic is in the long, drawn-out, quiet fights that are almost a bit scary. I think there's a real unpleasant magic in having to like evaluate whether you go for the grass or the trees, whether you go into that building or don't. And then the worst bits, in the best way, are when you're in the last 3 or 4 people and you make a mistake. And one of the things I really like about PlayerUnknown's is the worst kind of multiplayer game is when you walk away and go, I was playing fine there. Like, I was playing well, and the game or the people playing around me or whatever fucked me. And I've never had that with PUBG. The time before I won, there were 2 people left. We were in the centre of a town, so there's buildings everywhere, there's windows everywhere. It's very claustrophobic. And there were 2 people left, me and another person. And I threw out every grenade I had, everything. I was down to just a gun. And I kind of worked out what building they were in. So I stepped inside the building and I thought, right, okay, this is it. 2 people, guns blazing, I'm clearing the house, and whatever happens, happens. And I opened the doors, went through as quick as I could, and the second I'd opened the final door, I knew where they were, and I walked up the stairs, and they were at the top and popped me. And it was terrible because I was the second person and I could have won that. But I knew the second they got me, I knew if I hadn't thrown my grenades out, I would have had that. I could have cleared all those doors and I would have had them trapped. And it was my own behaviour and mistakes that made that game fuck me. And I really appreciate how in its simplest bare bones terms, you have to play well, or you have to at least be trying to strategize and think forwards to get something out of it. So I like the tension, and I really, really like the way that the game uses very basic mechanics to make you try to be better than the other people, rather than just, it's not about picking class, it's not about the stuff you've got in a loot box. It's pure gameplay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that's very unique amongst it, is that it's not kind of driven by classes and all of that stuff. It's driven by kind of personal player ability. But also, I noticed that you're saying it's a game that whenever you die, you feel like it teaches you how to play better. Which makes it very
I should
to another game.
I should clarify. Not every time. I haven't learned something every time, but I know the mistake I've made, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you still feel like you know that you made a mistake, which makes it very similar to another game. And something that I really look forward to saying was that PUBG is actually just like Dark Souls. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
That's good though.
So, actually, I'd agree in more ways than I think you might at first think. Dark Souls is ugly. It's beautifully designed, undeniably. It's got 100,000 points on PUBG for its art design. But it's ugly to facilitate the way it's built. Like, if it had 10 times the graphics, it couldn't have that sort of diorama feel to it. The combat in Dark Souls is fairly clunky, but the way that the mechanics intertwine with each other is what gives it that magic, and that gives you that desire to keep pushing forwards. And in the same way, I think almost PUBG is the multiplayer version of that. If that's not too pretentious a sentence.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
It is a little.
Just like that.
Okay. So the final section I have to put to you is problems we have with the other's pick. So this is mainly... But I think it's important. We're trying to defend our game to be the game of the year here. So defend away. Do you want to go first? I've got one or two complaints.
Okay.
So Nier Automata is
Give it to me.
so close. We nearly did the whole thing. Nier Automata is a JRPG, right?
Yeah.
And one of the problems I have a lot of times with JRPGs is the way they are designed to look, and the way that they, specifically the character design, a lot I find to be a little bit cliche. Sorry, yeah. And I've yet to find a JRPG. Final Fantasy 15 nearly had me, but I've yet to find one that makes me go, I want to dive into this and experience that world. I feel like a lot of times when a game is, I guess Metal Gear Solid could be argued, but like a lot of times when you see a game purely from a trailer, you kind of get an understanding of whether you want to experience that world or not. And Nier didn't do that for me. And one of the reasons is because of the way the character designed. If you look up Nier Automata on Google, one of the first pictures that comes up is less than flattering of the main character. And to me, it feels a little bit a few years old, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Does the game strive past that?
No. I like at the end of the day, it's kind of no, not really. I know where you're coming from, and like ultimately, it's kind of. I think the interview with Yoko Taro was like, why does he make like women design women in certain ways, and he's like, I like women, was his like response. And I think like that's kind of
excellent.
That's kind of at the end of the day, there's not too much I can say about that because it is still like a focus. I think it's less focused than maybe you might think from looking at like images of it. And I think, I said before about the characters being really well designed, and I think there's more there than you might think, I guess, when you look at kind of images of it. And in terms of like kind of how detailed they are in terms of like just like movement of like materials and all that kind of stuff is really well detailed. But
okay,
in terms of does it get past it and like explain it in a nice way that kind of goes, oh yeah, okay.
So
not so much.
So I should clarify. I wasn't meaning specifically like they're designed to look this way, but I mean JRPGs often have a tendency to really amplify that. Like MGS5 is a perfect example. Quiet is a dumb character. She's a fucking dumb character. But it would be a lot easier to ignore that the dumbness of that character if like the camera angles weren't picked to make you look at it. If the story and the interactions with other characters weren't like amplifying that. So
okay. Well, I mean, in that sense,
do you see what I mean?
In that sense, it's probably not as bad as most.
Okay.
Of that genre, or of like Japanese games, it's not the worst. But yeah, I know what you mean. What was your other criticism?
I have kind of forgotten it, to be honest. No, the other criticism is Platinum have been struggling for a little while now to really make their mark on the industry, and like they did a fair few years ago. They're not at the Vanquish, Transformers, Bayonetta 1 level of everything they make is a hit that they used to be. They've had some notable struggles.
Pretty sure they didn't make Bayonetta 1.
Don't fucking do this to me. Every fact I know about Bayonetta is wrong. Good.
Sue me.
But like they've had some notable struggles, and they've had some stuff going on internally that's sort of seeped out to the outside world. Do you think this is the kind of game that Platinum made their name on, or is this the kind of game that Platinum are making their name on now?
I think, while you paint quite a bleak picture, I think Nier Automata is one of the games that's really kind of brought people to Platinum. Okay. You know, it sold, I think it's, for a game coming from there, I think it sold something along the lines of 2 million, I believe, which is really high for a game like that's, well, come from Platinum for one thing. But, you know, like, I think it's always tough when you talk about these things, because you're like, you compare it to something like Call of Duty and you're like, but you know, for that style of game, 2 million was far more than they were expecting.
But that makes the point. If you compare it to something like Call of Duty, 2 million, it's still a fairly niche title, and to have 2 million sales is quite an achievement.
It's still a lot high. It's very high for that game, and I think like it surprised them a lot, actually, because I think this is one of the first games that they've made, apart from maybe Bayonetta, that really kind of broke through the Western side. You know, like, I think it's one of their most popular games so far. I don't know about that for certain, but it seems that way. I don't know if they've actually come out and said it as much, but I know that like it really had quite a big impact this year. And you know, if you go to any gaming forum, you'll probably find Nier Automata as one of their kind of game of the years. It's kind of one of the ones that critics were kind of iffy. Critics liked it, but it's still kind of like iffy, whereas users have been like, yeah, this is an amazing game, I love it. You know, it's one of those kind of dividing ones. But I do think that this is kind of this is the style of game that will put Platinum on the map, and I really look forward to kind of whatever weird thing they do next beyond Bayonetta 3.
Fair enough. I imagine you've got quite a few reservations to throw at me.
Yeah. Right. So, are you on the defense now?
Yeah.
So, PUBG. I mean, I've already addressed a few of my problems, and you kind of answered them already in some ways, but I'll kind of go through quickly. So, you know, I said before about I'm just not very happy giving PUBG Game of the Year when it's not a game that's kind of, you know, it's a game that's the gameplay idea, the idea of it is amazing. It's great, and it's, you know, it's taken the world by storm. And you know, in a year's time, like Blizzard are going to release their own one, and it's going to be way better, and everyone's going to go on that.
Oh my god, PUBG with Overwatch characters!
Well, there's the thing.
Holy shit!
Blizzard is all about like taking an idea that's like proven, and then just being like, let's make our version of it. So like, you know, you've got Heroes of the Storm, you know, for Dota. You've got Overwatch for like Team Fortress, and like other team-based shooters, you know. So I promise you, we're going to see a battle royale Blizzard
game. I think the place we're gonna see it is Red Dead 2.
Oh, don't say that. I know you're going to love it and be like, oh, it's amazing, but no, please. I'm looking forward to that, actually. I think that'll be fun just because of the
Far Cry 5. It would make sense in Far Cry 5.
Yeah. But that's the thing. That's kind of what I say, though. It's like someone's going to come out and just do it so much better. And I think one of my problems about giving, say, PUBG Game of the Year is while it might be starting this off, I think a truly amazing Game of the Year can't just be like improved by like another generation. And not even another generation, but like, you know, in 2 years' time, there's going to be a better Battle Royale. I mean, if Fortnite already isn't, but, you know, I don't know. People are iffy. And it is different style. I think there will be something that will kind of be better against it. Because one of the problems that PUBG had, it's made. Oh, do you want to address that?
Yeah. wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. I don't know that something's going to make it better, but I think something will make it more kind of traditionally video gamey. Something will make it like, if it's in Red Dead, for example, Red Dead will be hand built by Rockstar Games, and yeah, you can't argue in that sense that Red Dead is a better game, if nothing else, from like the people who made it stance. Yeah, Pubbage is for the most part probably, to give it a nasty phrase for it, but probably like the equivalent of a good asset flip, and. Yeah, if somebody like Red Dead does it, then yeah, fair dues to them. They probably should be considered in higher echelons, whether it plays as well or not. But I think, for example, the fact that Overwatch came out and was the best team shooter in a decade, if not more, takes nothing away from Team Fortress 2. I think Portal 2 takes nothing away from Portal 1. I think the first MOBAs they're not taken away from in any way by Heroes of the Storm. And in what Pubbage did, like, it kind of says something that it came on the map, and within a couple of months everyone was like, we need one of these. Rockstar tried to make it work in GTA 5. Epic basically copied and pasted the design document because they have access to it. Like, yeah. if it takes the concept to prove that it works, there's got to be something in the concept.
Oh yeah, sure. And of course there is. I think it is a great concept, and I think it will kind of take off, and something will do it a lot better. Because, ultimately, like, props to the people who made the game, but ultimately, like, you do get the feeling that the people who made it don't really know what they're doing as well as, like, say, a big team would.
And in response to that, to some extent, I think the support it will be shown going forward will change that to some extent. The new map that they showed off for it, the desert, is not that. It's not that asset flip style. It is built from the ground up for the game.
Made by people who know what they're doing slightly better.
And they have said that they will be doing a similar revisit to the first map. And I really appreciate that, because I think that's showing that it's sort of, even they're willing to say, yeah, we hastily threw this together, and I think that's the thing that will keep
it going forwards. But I do feel in that respect that, like, if that is the case, then maybe we should look at it kind of. This is my cheap way of winning. Maybe we should look at it next year.
If we can do that, then my game of the year is Overwatch, and I have you beat.
Yeah. Like, yeah. Failing at the moment, but yeah.
I think there's a couple of things that the dev team deserve props for, and one of those things is, like, the way they've gone from some people who hastily put together a concept to people who have actually become a notable dev team. They put out, like, I got the game for Xbox One on the day it came out, and the day it came out, it was a fucking mess. Yeah. Like, it was an absolute mess. It was playable, but, like, the first 5 minutes of the game was strategizing around a slideshow. And in 4 or so weeks, the game is so much better. And not only does it run so much better, but the features they've implemented, the way that they're starting to bring it to spec to the PC. And this is a dev team who threw this together from basically asset flips in Korea. This is not like Ubisoft or even Platinum, who have that kind of experience and that strength behind them. They have actually kind of risen to the occasion, especially with the second map. And that, if nothing else, if we don't give this game of the year, they deserve huge props for the way they've taken something that was very much a fledgling infant idea and turned it into an actual real game that can compete with something like Nier or Assassins, and has done this year.
Yeah, it's a good response. When was it updated anyway? Like, do you know?
How do you mean?
As in, like, when was this update that kind of improved it, stability-wise?
On the Xbox One? They've put out nearly an update a week.
Okay.
They missed the week of Christmas, New Year, I think, but the game's been out for 5 and a bit weeks, and we're on the 4th update.
Here's my reason I asked, is that could I argue that it wasn't the game that it is now in 2017? In terms of, like, would you still be like...
Shit.
Would you still be rating it if it had like the problems that it did have and the lag and the bugs that it did have back before its kind of good updates that it's had recently?
That's a really good question.
I think
That's a really
it's
good
something that's worth
question.
saying in these kind of games because I know that like something like No Man's Sky Revisited has like really improved, and I don't know whether you can count that the same as like with PUBG and go, now it's really good, but what was it like during 2017?
Okay, so
Stumped you like that.
so I have two responses to that. That's an amazingly good question. I would suggest that I'm not arguing for PUBG on one platform over another, and I think them bringing it up to spec on the Xbox as to where it is on the PC shows the quality of where it is and was on the PC. I would also say that I got a couple of near wins at before Christmas or around the time of Christmas when I was at home with the family, and like even my mum and Mairead were like tense and not talking just in case they like. So I think the core concept is what I'm arguing for here. But yeah, okay, there's probably an argument to be made that the support that it's shown past its launch date is what's given it a few more notches on the belt. That's probably a fair criticism to label against it.
Yeah. And like, if you hadn't won last week, would you be still saying this game was the game?
I mean, okay, so yeah, that's a really fair criticism. Is a lot like I was on the fence thinking that PUBG was my game of the year, and then I won the game, and I was like, right, that's it. That solidified the argument. Yes, if PUBG was. If I hadn't won that, I would have been a little more muddy. But what I can safely say, and I can say this because we put this episode off for 2 weeks to give me the chance to do it, is if I hadn't won that game, I wouldn't have a game of the year.
Yeah.
Like, legitimately, I would be arguing for South Park, but it would be a half-assed, like, yeah, it was funny and it's well made. Like, winning it, securing the win is kind of it's kind of a cheap way to get an opinion on Game of the Year. But, like, that's kind of the point of multiplayer games.
Okay. Yeah.
So are we at that point now where we have to actually decide? So we've cut a bit of the audio at this point. We've had our tiny little behind-the-scenes discussion that we very rarely have. And we've kind of come to the conclusion that we've switched sides from where we were last year. Last year we were arguing Uncharted versus The Witness, and Lewis was on the end of something that was more approachable, something that was a little more generic, but not in a bad sense. It was known for being the Game of the Year nominee, whereas The Witness was this handmade, everything is custom built, artisanal coffee shop of video games. And we've kind of switched places now in the allegory that we discussed earlier. With that being said, we can't give it to The Witness 1 year and then give it to the entirely opposite game the next, especially with the kind of stuff, the kind of ground that PlayerUnknown's Battleground still has to make. So whilst it's a very good game, whilst it's an absolutely fantastic concept, and whilst I do think you should give it a go, Mr. Crawford, I'm more than happy to lay the award down at Platinum's feet. That makes our Game of the Year for 2017 Nier Automata. Well done.
Cool. I'm happy. I've won one.
Congratulations.
Actually, I guess I've won two now, so, you know.
Yeah, so we're kind of 2-2 at this point, I think.
What was your other one?
Have we done 3 Game of the Years? Have we only done 3?
I think we've done 3. It was Witcher 3.
Fuck.
Which I won, just saying.
There was Witcher versus Arkham Knight. There was Witness versus Uncharted.
Sorry, I forgot that was what you brought to the table.
Oh, get fucked! It's a good game. Yeah, we've only done 3. Crap. Well, I guess that means something good's got to release this year then. That, ladies and gentlemen, is our Game of the Year episode. This has been 1 hour and 23 minutes.
Right.
In our time, we'll probably cut it down to nearer an hour. Nearer tomato.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much for listening. Also, thank you for listening in January when we put this out. Sorry, the last one was like in August or something. That was kind of our fault. If you did listen and you enjoy it, please feel free to drop it a like so that it gets out in front of a few more people, because that'd be nice. And subscribe to it, because that way you don't miss anything that we post, and we post lots of stuff. The Overwatch Sombra review will be actually coming out this week. Sorry, I had a bunch of like video stuff to do last week.
Ooh, all the video stuff.
And by Sombra, I meant Moira, because I don't know how to speak, because we've done this for an hour now. And yeah, we'll see you, I guess, next week for a more regular episode of the show when we'll like bitch about video games or something.
What else could happen?
Well, like ironically, the week that we decide to do Game of the Year, like some of the biggest news in the industry comes out for the year.
Yeah, I know.
But we're like, no, we'll just argue about 2 games. So that was that. Thank you very much for joining me. Congratulations on your nomination, Lewis. Well done.
Thank you.
And we will see you next year for Game of the Year, and next week for another episode of the show. Until then, the game's up.